Welcome to Backstory and Beyond. My name is John Daniel, and I'm humbled to be your host. But I'm super thrilled to be here with Miss Della Clark, who is the president and CEO of the Enterprise Center in Philadelphia. Welcome, Della.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, John. And also, I have another title as well. I am partner at Innovate Capital Growth Fund.
Excellent, ma'am. Excellent. Della, the whole idea of Backstory and Beyond is to weave in where a person comes from to what they're doing now. So we focus on things like calling, purpose, peak human potential, and what it is that you're looking to achieve. So that said, let's begin with your backstory. Please share where you've come from, how you got to where you are.
Well, John, that's an interesting question because if you'd have asked me that question when I was 6 years old, it would be completely different today. But I was born in Tyler, Texas, which is pretty much outside of Dallas. And most of my family and I grew up in the Dallas area. However, I left Texas right after I walked across the stage of high school, and I've never moved back. And partly it's because the world just sucked me up, consumed me to see what it was like outside of Texas. While I like to say I'm still a Texan today, I guess if I look at my past, John, it was my mother who probably had the most profound impact on me as a little girl, because my mother was a very smart woman, but she didn't have the same opportunities I did. She was not able to go to college. She had 7 kids. I was next to the baby, and I watched my mother be able to manage 2 nickels. And she was able to feed 7 kids on a little income. I watched her budget. I watched her have financial acumen. And those are the traits I give my mother a lot of credit for. I give my father credit for entrepreneurship. My father died, and he never knew he was an entrepreneur because back then you were labeled as a man who couldn't get a job. But my father tried really hard to be a businessman, be an entrepreneur, but he suffered from the same syndrome that many entrepreneurs suffer from today, which is access to capital. And that is the reason that I am focused on capital today, moving it to people and places where it ordinarily doesn't flow.
Outstanding, Della. I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that later in terms of the mission, vision, values. But let me reflect upon what you said. What I just heard you say is both your mother and father in proactive and just being in existing ways impacted who you are and who you want to continue to become in this process. The fact that your father was considered someone who just didn't have a job, but he was an entrepreneur is telling. It's very, very telling. I love what I'm hearing. Let's move on to, in many respects, talking about capital. What's the mission, vision, values, measurable objectives of what you're doing with both organizations?
If you'd asked me that question 5 years ago, I probably would not articulate the same vision I am today. And that is because I came to realize about 5 years ago the mistakes that I made in leading entrepreneurs down this path and journey of success, because I really was focused primarily on contracts. But I've come to realize that if you look at the ecosystem of capital, contracts provide capital to meet the operating expenses of that specific contract. And sometimes the margins is not sufficient for additional growth. If you look at debt, debt is to meet a business condition. And oftentimes entrepreneurs get confused with debt. And they think it is for growth. It is not a substitution for revenue. And equity, you need equity in order to have patient capital, to grow a management team, to look at new market opportunities and grow. And so I'd like to say the Enterprise Center and Innovate Capital today is to bridge the mission between all 3 of those and to educate entrepreneurs how capital flows.
Outstanding, outstanding, ma'am. That said, I'm curious about what your specific leadership responsibilities are for either organization. I know you've kind of approached that, but tell me what you're thinking about in terms of your strategy and the things that you do.
Well, I have a couple of strategies because sometimes as a leader, I have to act like Bobby Knight, where you have to throw a chair at an entrepreneur to get them to wake up and understand the mindset they need to grow. Because oftentimes their mindset is a derivative of their resources. And you cannot have vision and focus solely on limited resources that you have. You have to learn how capital flows. And so my leadership style changes according to the audience, according to who I'm speaking with, and according to the stage of development they're in. Because sometimes, John, you got to push an entrepreneur through the cycle. You got to push them because they're afraid. And sometimes I'm afraid. And so I rely on my staff to push me as well. So I would say I have a diverse leadership style.
Love it, love it. Speaking of your staff, given what you expect them to do, how do you attract, train, develop, and retain them as you move forward?
Well, now I'm looking for experience. I'm looking for subject matter experts. Early in my career, I was just looking for someone to do the work. Not anymore. I need skilled, track record, and experience in helping to guide this because the future now, John, has become more chaotic and more complex. And the world is smaller now. And so you need this global thinking. You need experience. You need track record. So I think my leadership now is to find folks who can join the team who got track record and can bring a book of business with them.
Outstanding, outstanding. Very much to the point, clear, transparent. Tell me now, in this world that we live, that has transformed quite dramatically because of two issues, and I'd like you to address both. One is administrative and leadership change, not only in the United States, but in many countries in the world. And the second, as you ponder it, is what does the media transformation, the speed at which information is moving, and I'm talking about information, misinformation, and disinformation, how does that impact what you're attempting to do for MBEs, would-be entrepreneurs, people who are already successful?
Mm-hmm. I'm going to start with the second question first.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm actually scared of the media and where it's going because some entrepreneurs focus too much on it. And you can almost become superficial or pretender if you are into social media yourself in a way in which you pretend that you're doing better than what you are. I believe that if you need help, you need vision, you need growth strategies, you need to surround yourself with subject matter experts and not social media, and not telling your story in such a way that puts you on a pedestal when you're really at the ocean floor. And so I'm really very conscious of how I project the Enterprise Center, Innovate Capital, as well as myself, because I'm a very straightforward person, and I would prefer, as Don Craven been saying at this conference, around truth. You know, telling the truth. Where are you really in your growth stage so that people are willing to help you? In regards to the first question you asked, which was around, what was that first question? I'm sorry.
Conservative drift, not only in the United States, but across the world, and how that impacts the resources, the sense of belonging for entrepreneurs.
Right. And you had mentioned the word administrative when you asked that question.
Yes.
And so really, business and financial infrastructure is very important as you look globally. And also the cost of capital. As you know, a dollar has different meaning in different countries, and as well, the resource around that dollar changes. And so in some countries you go to, the dollar is weak. In others, it is strong. And so having that global perspective and understanding globally how you do business, how your small business here in America is impacted by global decisions is very important, particularly now where we live in a tariff-driven world.
Outstanding, Della Clark. A few more questions, and the final question is going to be if there's anything that you want to share that we haven't covered in this discussion. I want to talk about two other things prior to that, though, and that is innovation and inclusion. One might argue that you can't have innovation without inclusive experiences around the table. What are your thoughts about that?
I agree with you, John. I think they go hand in hand. And when I think of innovation, it really is every organization should have a mini lab where innovation takes place with intention. You know, whether it's AI, whether it's team building, sales driven, it is very, very important. And the use of platforms and systems to grow. The second part around inclusion is that our organization should reflect the world, by ethnicity, by religion, by sexuality, by perspective. I think it's so important as we look to grow our organizations.
Thank you, ma'am. Another question before the final question. And so, do you think that inclusion in the broadcast industry with folks who've walked in the moccasins of those folks you're trying to help is important?
Absolutely. Very, very important. I had my team, and we recently looked at a documentary on Reginald Lewis and heard his story and how he wanted to be the first African American in America to create significant wealth. His story had a profound effect on my staff and how we look at our work today. And so, thinking about Reginald Lewis and the pillars that he built while he was alive is something that I think we need to continue to celebrate today.
Very unique individual. I like some of his writing too. Let's conclude to give you final word on anything that we've missed that you think is important to share with our audience.
Well, when I started 5 years ago to learn capital markets, the first thing that I learned is that I had the wrong narrative. And so I'm encouraging entrepreneurs and CEOs today to look at their narrative, look at their lingo, and begin to change it. Because if you're a growing business and you're going to need various different forms of capital, you have to learn that your lingo has to be commensurate with the type of capital that you are pursuing. Because I went to capital markets with a lingo that wasn't appropriate. And many of the investors that I was speaking to didn't even know what I was speaking about. And so lingo and narrative really matters. For instance, in a low wealth community, you hear often the use of the word technical assistance. That is not a capital market word. You hear financial literacy. You hear the word training. We need to really upskill and change our lingo so that it represents the future economy, which is built on value and capital and growth.
That mindset is quite innovative, Della Clark, and I'm appreciative of it. As we come to a close, I want to just take the time to thank you. I want to thank the National Minority Supplier Development Council under new leadership of Don Cravens, Esquire. And I appreciate all that's happening here. I'm enjoying the conference, and I look forward to seeing you in Philadelphia very soon.
Yep. And I want to say the same about the National Minority Supplier Development Council. I am also appreciative, and I am happy to be here to promote how capital flows and how it is to be used to grow your business. Thank you.
Thank you, Della Clark.
Thank
Much
you.
appreciated.